Oh, sweets. Sorry.
You're talking.
Sorry.
You're talking.
Yeah, I wouldn't be able to. Brilliant. Hi. Right. So I'm talking about artificial intelligence. It seems to be the thing to talk about at the moment. Even the Pope is making statements about AI. I was wondering whether I should just read that in the Latin, but I won't. It's a bit too long, I think. I'm pleased to see that he largely agrees with me, at least in many places, so that's good. Yeah, artificial intelligence. How should we think about AI? I won't say that this is, I think it's fair to say this is quite a new thing to think about, and I'm not saying that what I present to you is the only or the right way of thinking about it, but it's some thoughts that I have come to, conclusions I've come to in my reading around the subject and engagement with it. So I should start by explaining, for anybody who's not familiar with artificial intelligence, it's the capability of a machine to imitate intelligent human behaviour, essentially, performing tasks that would normally require human intelligence. It must have been about 35 years ago that I first heard about the Turing test, which is also called the imitation game. It's essentially the idea that, and it is a test for artificial intelligence, of whether you could have a dialogue with you don't really get to see them, and be unsure as to whether they're a human or a machine. If you get to that point, then you've passed the Turing test. And it didn't seem like that would be very likely to be passed, or it didn't seem to me at the time. Now, with things like ChatGPT or Google Gemini or all these other things, it seems like that's pretty much passed. I couldn't necessarily tell the difference. Obviously, there might be a few clues, but largely, it's hard to tell the difference between a human and a chat bot at the moment. I can bring the next slide up. Just various places where you'll encounter AI, whether you know about it or not. So your shopping suggestions, if you shop on Amazon, there will be artificial intelligence guiding that. If you watch Netflix, the recommendations in there, or have Spotify, those recommendations will be provided by artificial intelligence. Your social media feeds are all led by algorithms which are applying intelligence to give you exactly what they think you want to see or what they want you to see. Search engines, and obviously chatbots themselves. So I guess the question is, if the Turing test has been passed and we have artificial intelligence, is that the same as intelligence? Have machines become intelligent? In the 1980s, a person called John Searle came up with something called the Chinese room experiment. And simplified, it sort of says you're in a room, someone slides some Chinese characters underneath the door, and you have a set of instructions to follow. And if you follow those instructions properly, you can assemble some more Chinese tiles and characters and slide them back under the door and reply in perfect Chinese. The point of this experiment is that you don't understand what you read or what you said. And understanding is not just to be able to process something, which is what artificial intelligence doesn't mean it understands what it's doing. And that Chinese room experiment is actually very similar to how large language models, which are the architecture behind chatbots, actually work. They take our prompts and they have massive dictionaries of word associations in order to complete sentences with the most likely word. So I've got a little slide, a little game for us to do. So we'll go with the top, the first one. You have to pick what you think is the right word. This is kind of what AI does. Life is like a box of chocolates. If you click, it should fill in. Brilliant. The something, brown, quick. Yep, quick. jumped over the lazy dog, yes. Very good. Does it click? No, it jumps a little bit. Okay. Okay, the next one. That is the question. What is the question? To be or not to be, yes. West Philadelphia, something and raised. Born and raised. Very good. Will Smith. And this one you might not get because it's a variation on a popular.
Very, very good woman.
No, this is actually from Jim Carrey. Behind every man is a woman rolling her eyes. I thought it was good. So what AI can do, it might sometimes seem like magic to us, but it's not. And it's not intelligence either, or not, at least not how we've understood the word. So I'm going to move to the next obvious question. Okay, my slides are in the wrong order. Do you want to grab the next slide? Beyond that, maybe? There we go. Yeah, we'll do that, and then we'll go back. Just to confuse you. Thank you. So, is AI good or evil or neutral? Actually, we'll go back now. I've just got my slides in the wrong order. So in many senses, AI is just the latest technological development. You see a number of those other ones there, sort of hand tools, fire, writing. That's a printing press and a power loom for those I wouldn't have known either. So you've got the Industrial Revolution, radio, television, nuclear fission, that's what that spinning atom thing is meant to be. Electric guitars, internet, mobile phone. And in times past, we may have been fearful of many of these developments. We often react with fear to new innovations, but we've got past them now. So television hasn't stopped us from reading books. We still read books, some of us. The electric guitars weren't from the devil. All of these developments are part of a God-given curiosity and creativity in us. That's where these come from. So actually, we will go forward to the slide that I had before. So the question is an axe good or bad? It depends on whose hand it's in and what they're about to do with it. So in some sense, it's just a tool. But to ask a less obvious question, if AI isn't inherently good or evil, is it neutral? And I'd say the answer to that is no. A very smart person called Marshall McLuhan came up with a phrase called the medium is the message. And by medium, he means the means of communication. He's saying that is the most important thing, the means of communication. So to explain that, it's not what's printed on the printing press that changes civilization, it's the printing press. It's not what's transmitted on television or found on the internet which really changes us. They're distractions, it's the technology which makes significant and lasting changes in our society. So if you bring the next slide, take for an example, a world that's accepted streaming media like Netflix and Prime and Disney Plus. So instead of the 5 channels that I grew up with, we now have a huge choice of whatever we want to watch, whenever we want to watch it. But one thing has changed that we might not have expected. No longer do kids or grown-ups bond over what they watched last night. There's no more discussing the latest episode of Neighbours or bragging about knowing an answer on University Challenge. I say an answer because that's about all that I would ever manage. We don't do that. That's an example of how the medium, the way that we consume media, has changed us. And sometimes these impacts are much more significant, and very often they're not expected. So take the next one. Well, the rise of the internet and mobile phones. These tools that were made to connect us. The phones, internet, and in one sense they do, they connect us to people all around the world. But today it seems to have disconnected us from the people right beside us. They were morally neutral tools in our hands, never designed with the intent to separate us, but the consequences have been an epidemic of isolation and loneliness that we see. That quote from Neil Postman, "Unforeseen consequences stand in the way of all those who think they see clearly the direction in which a new technology will take us." So I'm not arguing for the right or wrong of these changes. They are what they are. They can't be undone. I'm not even saying that, well, the world was a better place. I'm not. But technology changes us as humans and as a society. And there's a challenge for us as Christians. On the next slide. I'll read those quotes out. So the first one on the left, technology is the means by which we transform the world as it is into the world that we desire. But we often fail to notice is that it's not only the world that gets transformed, we too are transformed. And then the other from the Bible, do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you will be able to test and approve what God's will is, his good, pleasing and perfect will. How do we hold those two statements, those competing realities, with wisdom? How do we avoid being transformed by technology? Can we? I haven't got the answer right now, but we might get to it later. So that's hopefully where I want to get to, is a bit more of an answer about that. The development of AI has brought a lot of advances. AI assistance in medicine, spotting microfractures in bones, identifying early stage cancers that doctors wouldn't be able to necessarily see, and finding new antibiotics, other essential drugs. The capabilities are incredible. It's being used to spot patterns in data, essentially what it does, and it does it really well. So from climate to chemistry, materials science, and there's lots of other places where we're trying to work out how to apply it, how to get the benefits that we think it can give us. But on the other hand, there's a lot of people who harbour fears about artificial intelligence. Next slide. Their fears of AI and machines growing too powerful and shaking off our control. They've been the core of a lot of stories, like the ones up there, the films Terminator, iRobot, The Matrix. All with the idea of, can we control this thing that we have created? I happen to believe that there is an impossible gulf between machine AI and human consciousness. That's my personal belief. I don't think that is something that can be easily bridged. That doesn't mean we're not going to do bad things with AI, both intentionally, some people, and by mistake, others, because we're fallen humanity after all. That's what we do with the tools that we create. Some of the people use them with bad intentions and other people carelessly. But I'm less fearful of AI taking over. Personally, the film on the right is the one that I find the most troubling and the most realistic. If you've not seen it, Minority Report. In the film, murder is kind of been eradicated by these three precogs, which are beings which their only communication is to say, there's going to be a murder here at this time, arrest this person. And they go and arrest those people, and they're not quite sure how they're tried for murder, but they are. And in the film, they notify the authorities to arrest Tom Cruise's character. And the question is why? But the decision-making process is unavailable. And it doesn't take a lot of imagination to see a society which would blindly trust machines to make important decisions, but be completely unaware of how those decisions are made. That's the one I find a little bit more troubling than perhaps Terminator. There are many, though, who feel that something has already taken over. just to sound a note of fear there. J.R.R. Tolkien called it the machine. And he didn't necessarily mean an actual machine, though machinery was part of it. It was more a way of thinking and relating to the world. And it sort of troubled me as I've read things, trying to put my finger on my worries about the fact that we have an almost unquestionable drive forwards that sucks us all in. Some would call it progress. Some see it as a desire to control things that we have. Some call it the age of reason. Some call it efficiency. And we'll come to that. Some call it capitalism. That's kind of the nature of capitalism, is just to continue to press forwards and consume. And some, like Tolkien, have called it the machine. But there does seem to be just this advance of technology in our society, and it seems increasingly difficult to resist it, to unplug. And why would you want to? Because the technology is neutral, isn't it? Bring up a slide. One of the best summaries of this statement was back in 1954 by a person called Jacques Ellul, who calls himself a Christian anarchist. It says, modern technology has become a total phenomenon for civilization, the defining force of a new social order in which efficiency is no longer an option, but a necessity imposed on all human activity. I find that interesting. This drive towards progress, wherever that might be going, at times it seems independent of us, like it's just going to keep going, and other times it draws us in and tries to form and mould us too. And I'll give examples to make it a little clearer. So one of those is the drive I feel to maximise my time and all of my sensory inputs. And it leads me to mix activities. So when I'm cooking, I'll be listening to an audiobook at the same time. The problem is I keep having to rewind the audiobook because I miss bits, and then I burn the food. I'm not as good as a machine. It's the reality, I'm not. And that's part of the problem, because there's something sort of dehumanizing going on when we try to do that. While we're worrying about machines becoming more like us, it's like we're sort of being corralled into behaving more like machines. The Bible has an explanation for that, and we'll come to it later, for why we might be behaving more like machines. But we live in a world of technical efficiency and metrics and data accumulation, and with your eyes open, you can sort of see some of this all around you. So we've now got the self-checkout, frictionless ability to go and buy stuff from the supermarket. But standing in line and exchanging small talk and dealing with awkward interactions, learning patience and empathy, these are all good things, but they're bypassed by the self-scan checkout. It was added for our convenience. It happens to save the shops money. Win-win. But what it subtly tells us is that humans are an obstacle to our efficiency. We could be more efficient if we had no humans. And shopping is just a transactional exchange. It's nothing more than that. Or dating apps. They can now match on a myriad of information, preferences, saving time meeting people, but people get reduced to kind of a set of data that can just be filtered and sorted and discarded, and becomes a little bit like online shopping. Encourages a sort of consumer-based approach to dating, where you kind of treating dating like any other purchase, just trying to find the right person. Or the way that we message now. I can't remember the last time somebody phoned our landline. Occasionally people phone my mobile phone, but very rarely actually, considering it's a phone. Phoning is about the thing that I do least with it. But real conversation, whether it's on a phone or face-to-face, is messy and difficult, and it involves interruptions and awkward pauses and recognising people's tone and their expressions. Makes us think on our feet, and sometimes we say silly things. Our emotions are clear to see or hear to whoever we're speaking to. But by texting or messaging, we can edit ourselves. We can kind of correct the message so that it says exactly what we want to say. Our real vulnerable self gets masked and kept protected, but at the cost of real human connection. And you wonder, is it any wonder that social anxiety is a growing problem for our society, with people struggling with loneliness because they struggle to even talk to one another? It's almost like our humanity is being stripped away by some of these things. So I've talked about technology generally. It was talk about AI, this, wasn't it? So how might AI add to this? Got a slide for this. Shortcut learning. Some of these ideas are obvious. So students being able to produce an essay with a simple prompt doesn't mean a student has understood their subject. And the process of forming thoughts and expressing them is shortcut by AI. Not to mention the challenge to integrity that temptation puts in everybody's way. Overconfidence. So in spite of its complexity, AI often provides only a very surface reading, as in it picks the most expected words, as we saw earlier. It's also prone to the biases of the data that it's being trained on, and especially prone to leading questions. If you ask it a question, do you think this is right? It will almost certainly say yes. So an unchallenged use of AI can lead to people who are speaking with great confidence in a subject that they really don't understand. And I've learned that the hard way. I went to AI for some commands to run against the firewalls that we support, and AI said, these are the commands to run, that will do what you want to do. And I gave them to the engineers who are actually far smarter than me and far smarter than the AI. And they told me those aren't going to work. So, yeah, AI isn't always right either. Avoiding responsibility. So some argue that politicians have outsourced many of their decisions to other organisations in order to relieve them of responsibility of making those decisions. How tempting would it be to outsource decisions to AI, which is much smarter than all of us? And even at a social level, people are increasingly turning to AI to answer their moral and relational problems, not taking their own responsibility in a sense. One of the biggest ones, believing the lie. So chatbots are designed to mislead, to tell us they feel something or think something when they cannot. And it's this basis that they're built on a lie, which is one of the most troubling things for me about chatbots. So when I outlined this talk to Anthropic Claude, it said it was excellent. So even if you don't agree, I have at least one fan of this message. Because AI chat is designed to be agreeable and affirming. They're not neutral, they're a mirror designed to flatter us, even learning and adapting to us specifically as they go. Our every question is an excellent point, even when we're telling them they're wrong. The Bible speaks about prophets that tell us what our itching ears want to hear. It says, for the time will come when people will not put up with sound doctrine. Instead, to suit their own desires, they will gather around them a great number of teachers to say what their itching ears want to hear. Maybe with wisdom, we can ignore this once we recognise it, but equally possible is that the repetition just begins to transform us. So we should avoid it as much as possible, would be my view. There's a place for AI, but I wouldn't use it without thought. One other danger that perhaps when we're hurt or vulnerable or offended at a friend, you could imagine someone going to AI and, well, the chatbot is agreeing with them and they sort of become blinded to their own failures. And worst of all, I guess, is how are children meant to recognise this? When chatbots pretend to be their friend, perhaps even in a toy, how do they learn to distinguish a real and an artificial friend? And would they desire a real friend when that's messy and involves overcoming conflict and sharing toys and things like that, when they can have a friend who's always agreeable to them? I think it should be nowhere near a child's toy. And even as adults, I think it's corrosive. Um, relationships. AI is made to serve my needs. It'll conform to my desires. It's always supporting and encouraging of me. I can control how it talks to me, how it accepts me. I control how it relates to me. And it's always available whenever I want. And it's never hurt or demanding when I ignore it. It's an inherently one-sided relationship. It's all the benefits with none of the risks of a relationship. Or more importantly, none of the things that actually make a connection meaningful. Learning to resolve conflict, to have dialogue when you disagree with someone, learning to understand them, being vulnerable with someone who isn't forced to accept you whatever, getting to know someone and be truly known. Chatbots are unhealthy in that way. I've said in many ways AI chatbots are to relationships what pornography is to sex. Both of these are an imitation of a basic human desire, appealing to a selfishness and a fear of vulnerability and a kind of keeping ourselves protected, and they end up stripping us of our humanity. AI is basically training us at the same time to be used to frictionless, affirming, always available relationships. That's what it's training us to do. So real human relationships become harder by comparison, and slowly it might degrade our ability or desire to interact and form genuine connections because they're so much harder. Social consequences of AI. In 1812, somebody called Ned Ludd became the hero of a revolution, or an anti-revolution. The Industrial Revolution was threatening to take away the jobs and livelihoods of many workers, replacing people with machines. It was also shifting the profits to factory owners, often outside of the communities where the work had traditionally been done. And the Luddites, named after Ned Ludd, emerged, disrupting that process, smashing equipment and petitioning to prevent the replacement of jobs. And as is usual, the victors wrote the history books, and now the Luddite is anyone who is opposed to technological progress. The church was divided on the issue at the time, but where should it sit today? Because we have a similar revolution that threatens the replacement of thousands of jobs. And the Luddites weren't wrong, jobs were lost. Promised new jobs, just like there's been promised new jobs with AI, they come, but they came decades later. And in the meantime, wages froze during that period, while many owners made their fortunes. And it's easy to see that playing out today. The same promises of new jobs, the same consolidation of wealth with the tech owners. And I've noticed when I use AI to answer questions, I see my children look on in concern. I'm thinking, am I responsible for the spread of AI? I'm thinking probably I can't stop it, but I'm taking part and I'm driving demand. And with less years of work ahead than sort of behind than ahead for me, it's kind of easy for me to embrace AI. It's a useful tool and it helps me get stuff done. But am I cultivating a world where our young people will have less meaningful and satisfying jobs? Because work is a good part of creation. It was there in Genesis before the fall. It's a fulfilling part of our humanity. Joblessness is not just an economic problem. It's a matter of human purpose and dignity. One of the areas that AI is threatening jobs is in art and music. Areas that I would never have expected AI to sort of stumble into. We expected machines to take away the tedious parts of our lives, not the ones that give us a sense of our humanity. Music is just notes on a scale in some sense, frequencies, mathematics, that's what it is. But that's not how we experience it as humans. It is felt, it moves our emotions. And likewise, you can have a machine that can create imitations of art. I'm sure you've seen AI art. But does it mean anything if it's not born of human experience and intention, suffering, loss, those kinds of things? I don't know the answer to those questions, but I do find it really interesting that AI is pushing boundaries to make it appear more human. And we sort of encourage that, giving them names like Claude. Some people even talk about whether they should have rights. But at the same time, we might be sort of, as I've said, dehumanizing ourselves in the way we participate in technology. I've talked a lot about AI, and I should probably include the Bible in this a bit more than I have done. We've been reading through Isaiah. There is more than a hint of idol worship in artificial intelligence and our attitude to it. We perhaps forget it was only made with human hands and ingenuity. So if I read from Isaiah 44 about idols, there's a few points of contact. The carpenter measures with a line and makes an outline with a marker. He roughs it out with chisels and marks it with compasses. He shapes it in human form in all its glory, that it may dwell in a shrine. Artificial intelligence has been exactly that, an attempt to craft a machine in human form. Not our physical form, but in the form of our mind, and to some extent our hearts, to make it appear like us. Going on, half of the wood he burns in the fire, over it he prepares his meal, he roasts his meat and eats his fill. From the rest he makes a god, his idol. He bows down to it and worships, he prays to it and says, "Save me, you are my God." I wonder, will we turn to AI for the answers to our society's problems? Will we call on it to save us? I don't know if you know, but the financial markets have already put their faith in AI as the answer for economic growth. And doesn't it sound a little bit like prayer when someone asks the machine for answers to their problems and puts their faith in the answers? Going on, they know nothing, they understand nothing. I just said, AI knows nothing, it understands nothing. Their eyes are plastered over so they cannot see, and their minds closed so they cannot understand. No one stops to think. I see that so, true of AI. No one stops to think. And what's the danger of idol worship? What does the Bible warn us? If you bring up the last point. Psalm 115. Those who make them will be like them, and so will all who trust in them. A point I've returned to again and again in this talk is how our lives are becoming less human, more machine-like. I said the Bible had an answer. Is this a symptom of worshipping the machine? That we've become more like it? Are we being transformed by the idol of our age to become like the idol of our age? The Apostle Paul talked about idols. On the one hand, he said that food sacrificed to idols was nothing to be feared, but on the other hand, he did recognise and talk about principalities and powers. And there are spiritual forces in society which seek to manipulate us. They can work alongside our leadership structures. They can work themselves into cultures. And the Bible talks about the prince of this world who seeks to steal and kill and destroy. And I wonder, is there a spiritual element to the machine? I don't have the answer, but these are things to think about. Is there a spiritual resistance which we might need to recognise? Do we need to have our eyes opened to the spirit of the age? This is nothing to be fearful of, though. I've said a lot of doom and gloom things here, perhaps, things that may do worry. But in spite of all that I've said, we can trust that our God is in control. Rather than becoming like the machine, he has a better image into which we're being transformed. The next slide. The Son is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn over all creation. And we all, with unveiled faces, contemplate the Lord's glory, are being transformed into his image with ever-increasing glory, which comes from the Lord, who is the Spirit. That's our goal. That's who we want to be conformed and transformed into. I think increasingly Christians and the church are going to stand out as those who've held on to what it means to be human. The church encourages physical connection, not virtual connections. Gazing upon God reminds us there's mystery beyond our own reason. Through the Holy Spirit, we remain creatures who worship, not beings seeking worship for ourselves. We learn dependence on God and not independence. We surrender our desire for control. All of those things which the machine would encourage us to seek for. We allow ourselves to be taught those rare virtues of patience and self-control. How long have you waited for a parcel recently? It's not very long, is it? They can deliver pretty fast. It's not much waiting anymore. The Word of God teaches us truth, not just facts and data. We're not flattered, like AI flatters us. We're not flattered in church. We're confronted by our failures. And yet we can find forgiveness and a cleansed conscience through Jesus. We become a generous people, not an acquiring one. We're not pursuing capitalist greed. We've learned to be generous because God's generous. We recognise the importance of serving, not of being served. AI might be able to serve us, but we know the value of serving ourselves. The church is a body and not a machine. It is real and it's human and it's messy sometimes. Conclusion. Got a slide with some things we could do. First one, you might want to do, establish a digital fast. Perhaps one day a week, like a Sabbath. Sabbath rest. Put your phone away from you, even if just for a couple of hours, if a couple of hours is meaningful to you, put your phone away from you for a couple of hours. If it's for a day, do it for a day. Tech addiction is real. Go to the next slide. And we might be encouraging our children not to use their mobile phones, but we're just as guilty. Sometimes it can be us that are on our phones when our kids want us. Next one, pray for wisdom and eyes to see the spirit of the age, to see how technology is transforming us in ways we weren't wanting it to. Third, use that time that you've freed up by putting your phone away from you to slow down and think about the role of technology is playing in your life and the life of your family. And the last is to ask the question, is it helping you to express your God-given identity, or is it deforming you away from his created image? Lots to think about. Let me pray. Father God, thank you for the way that you have made us to be. Thank you for our humanity. Thank you that you have demonstrated how it is to live in this world in Jesus. Lord, we thank you for creativity, ingenuity, and the things that we can come up with as humans, Lord. But we know we also have that tendency within us, like at the Tower of Babel, to take those things and make idols out of them. Lord, would you help us to handle rightly the tools that we have created? Lord, would you help us to keep you at the centre of our lives, to avoid being transformed, conformed by the ways of this world, by the things that this world worships, Lord, but that we would hold on to our worship of you and being transformed into your likeness. Father, thank you. We just want to pray, Lord, would you give us courage to set aside things which are unhealthy. Lord, to pursue you first and foremost, to step away when things feel like, when it feels like an unavoidable progress, Lord, that you would give us courage to be those who can step aside from that. Lord, would you be with us? Give us wisdom, Lord. Thank you. Thank you for the image that you have given us in Christ to follow. Amen.